It's just community college, my family laughed about my nursing degree, while I paid for my brother's MBA and my sister's law school. Not like a real education. When their student loans came due and my payments stopped, they got a real education and consequences. Hey Reddit, this story has been eating at me for months, and I finally decided to write it all out. Fair warning, it's long, it's messy, and it involves family dysfunction that would make a soap opera writer jealous. I'm 29 female, the middle child in a family that worships academic prestige like some people worship celebrities. My older brother Austin, 32, and younger sister Diana, 26, were always the golden children, while I was basically invisible unless they needed something. Growing up, our dinner table conversations sounded like college admissions forums. Dad would quiz Austin on his pre-law studies, while Mom gushed about Diana's advanced placement classes. Meanwhile, I'd sit there eating my meatloaf, listening to them plan these incredible academic futures that apparently didn't include me. The favoritism wasn't even subtle. When Austin got into his dream university for his undergraduate degree, they threw a party, invited the whole extended family, ordered a custom cake, the works. The cake literally had his university logo recreated in frosting. Dad made a speech about how proud he was to have raised such an intellectual powerhouse. Mom cried actual tears of joy. When Diana got accepted to 3 different colleges with partial scholarships, they took her on a celebration trip to Europe. 2 weeks touring prestigious universities in England and France, posting photos on social media with captions like, "Our brilliant daughter deserves," to see how the academic elite live. When I graduated high school with a 3.7 GPA and got accepted to the local community college's nursing program, Mom patted my head and said, "That's nice, dear. Very practical. Practical. Like I'd chosen to become a plumber or something." The thing is, I'd always wanted to be a nurse. Not because it was practical, not because it was easy, but because I genuinely wanted to help people. I'd volunteered at the local hospital during high school, shadowing nurses, watching them save lives and comfort families during the worst moments imaginable. These women and men were heroes in scrubs, and I wanted to be one of them. I'll never forget this one afternoon during my junior year of high school. I was volunteering in the pediatric unit when this 5-year-old kid named Tommy came in after a car accident. His parents were hysterical. The kid was screaming, and the doctors were focused on assessing his injuries. But this one nurse, Sarah, somehow managed to calm everyone down. She got Tommy interested in this little toy car she kept in her pocket, distracted him during the examination, and by the end of the shift, he was giggling and asking when she'd be back. That's when I knew. I wanted to be the person who could bring calm to chaos, who could make a scared kid smile even in the middle of a medical emergency. But my family saw nursing school as the consolation prize, the backup plan for kids who weren't smart enough for real college. "It's just community college," Austin said when I told them about my acceptance. He was home for winter break from his prestigious university, wearing a sweatshirt that cost more than my entire semester's tuition. Not like a real education. He was majoring in political science with a minor in economics, which as far as I could tell meant he spent most of his time in discussion groups arguing about theoretical policy implications. Real, practical stuff. Diana, who was a senior in high school at the time, nodded sagely. "At least you'll have job security. There's always going to be sick people, right? Thanks for the vote of confidence, sis." Dad tried to be supportive in his own way. "Nursing's a good profession for women," he said, like it was 1952. "Stable hours, decent pay. You'll be able to work part-time when you have kids." The assumption that I'd naturally want to work part-time because I was a woman stung. But what hurt more was the underlying message. My career would always be secondary, a side note to someone else's story. Mom was more direct. "Well, at least the tuition won't break the bank," she said. "Community college is so affordable compared to what we're paying for Austin." And there it was. The reminder that Austin's education was an investment worth making, while mine was just a budget-friendly afterthought. The financial disparities were staggering. Austin's tuition at his fancy private university was $45,000 per year, not including room and board, which added another $15,000 annually. Books, supplies, and living expenses brought his total cost to nearly $65,000 per year. Diana was looking at similar numbers for her top choice schools. Meanwhile, my entire 2-year nursing program would cost $8,400 total. Books and supplies maybe another $2,000. I could live at home and commute, keeping my part-time job at the local coffee shop to cover gas and personal expenses. But instead of being proud that I'd chosen an affordable path, they acted like it proved I wasn't ambitious enough to dream bigger. The comments started immediately. At Austin's winter formal, some family friend asked about my plans. Before I could answer, Mom jumped in. Oh, Carrie's doing the nursing program at the community college. Very sensible choice. Not everyone needs a university education. The way she said sensible made it sound like I'd chosen the most boring option possible. And the not everyone needs part was her polite way of saying not everyone is smart enough. At Diana's senior awards banquet, where she won scholarships for academic excellence, the conversation at our table was all about her bright future in law or politics. When someone asked what I was studying, Dad answered, Carrie's going into healthcare. She'll probably work at the hospital here in town. Probably work at the hospital here in town. Like my entire future was predetermined and small. I started nursing school determined to prove them wrong. The program was brutal. Anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, clinical rotations that started at 6 a.m. and ended at 8 p.m. I studied harder than I'd ever studied for anything, memorizing drug interactions and disease processes, while my classmates from real colleges were probably at parties. The academic rigor was no joke. We had to maintain a minimum 3.0 GPA to stay in the program, and anything below 75% on exams meant automatic remediation. Our pharmacology class covered over 300 medications, their uses, side effects, contraindications, and interactions. We had to pass medication calculation tests with 100% accuracy, no partial credit, because math errors in healthcare can kill people. My clinical rotations were eye-opening. I worked in intensive care unit, pediatrics, emergency, and medical surgical units. I watched nurses perform miracles daily, recognizing subtle changes in patient conditions that prevented medical emergencies, advocating for patients when doctors overlooked important details, comforting grieving families with a combination of professional expertise and genuine compassion. During my rotation in the emergency department, I saw a nurse named Janet handle a mass casualty event when a bus accident brought in 12 injured passengers. She coordinated triage, managed family members, assisted with procedures, and somehow kept track of every patient's status while maintaining calm professionalism. The doctors relied on her expertise completely. These weren't people who'd settled for a practical career. They were highly educated, incredibly skilled professionals who'd chosen nursing because they wanted to make a direct impact on human lives. During my second semester, I was working a clinical rotation in the cardiac unit when Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman recovering from bypass surgery, started showing subtle signs of internal bleeding. Her blood pressure was still within acceptable ranges. Her heart rate wasn't significantly elevated, but something felt off to me. She seemed restless, kept shifting positions like she couldn't get comfortable. Her skin had this grayish pallor that wasn't quite right. When I checked her surgical dressing, there wasn't obvious bleeding, but she winced more than she had during previous assessments. I mentioned my concerns to my supervising nurse, who initially dismissed them. Her vitals are stable, she said, checking the monitor. Blood pressure's 118/78, heart rate's 88, within normal limits for post-op. But I persisted. Something in my gut was screaming that this patient was in trouble. I asked her to page the attending physician, explaining my observations about the patient's skin color, her restlessness, the way she kept pressing her hand to her abdomen. The nurse, probably to humor the overeager nursing student, agreed to call the doctor. Dr. Martinez came to assess Mrs. Patterson, and within minutes he was ordering stat blood work and prep for emergency surgery. Her hemoglobin had dropped significantly, indicating internal bleeding that wasn't showing up in her vital signs yet. Good catch, he told me after they wheeled her to surgery. Another hour or two and we might have lost her. Mrs. Patterson survived. The surgery found a small vessel that had started bleeding internally, something that wouldn't have been obvious until her condition deteriorated dramatically. That's when I knew I'd found my calling. Not because it was practical or affordable, but because I was genuinely good at it. I had the instincts, the attention to detail, the ability to see patterns that others missed. But when I tried to share this story with my family during dinner, Austin interrupted me halfway through. That's great, he said dismissively, not looking up from his phone. Speaking of medical stuff, I've been thinking about switching my focus to health law. There's huge money in medical malpractice suits. The conversation immediately shifted to Austin's career plans, and my moment of triumph became background noise. Dad started asking about the earning potential in health law, while Mom wondered if Austin might specialize in pharmaceutical litigation. Nobody asked about Mrs. Patterson. Nobody wanted to hear how I'd potentially saved someone's life. My actual real-world experience in healthcare was immediately overshadowed by Austin's theoretical interest in profiting from healthcare mistakes. That was the pattern throughout nursing school. Every accomplishment I shared was either ignored or minimized, while Austin and Diana's academic updates were treated like breaking news. When I made Dean's List my first semester, I mentioned it casually during Sunday dinner. "Oh, that's nice," Mom said absently. "Diana, tell us more about your internship with the state senator." When I was selected for a competitive clinical placement in the trauma unit, Dad nodded and said, "Sounds intense." Iba then immediately turned to Austin. "How's that economics course going? Still thinking about graduate school?" When I was chosen to represent our nursing program at a state conference on healthcare innovation, presenting research on reducing hospital readmissions, the family response was lukewarm at best. "That sounds very professional," Mom said, like professionalism was somehow disappointing. But when Austin got selected for some undergraduate leadership program that seemed to involve mostly networking events and resume-building workshops, they acted like he'd been chosen for the Nobel Committee. The double standard was crushing, but I kept pushing forward. I graduated with honors and passed my NCLEX exam on the first try, something only 84% of nursing graduates manage to do. The exam is notoriously difficult, covering everything from basic anatomy to complex ethical scenarios, and passing it means you're qualified to practice as a registered nurse anywhere in the country. When I got the call that I'd passed, I was so excited I could barely contain myself. This was it. I was officially a registered nurse, ready to start my career saving lives and making a difference. I called my parents immediately. "I passed!" I shouted into the phone. "I'm officially a registered nurse." "That's wonderful, dear," Mom said. "We're proud of you. Listen, can we call you back? We're at Diana's college orientation, and we don't want to miss the financial aid presentation." They called back 3 days later. My graduation ceremony was on a Thursday. The ceremony was at 2 p.m., and I'd invited my family weeks in advance, sent them the details in a group text, even offered to reserve seats for them. The morning of graduation, I got a text from Dad. "Sorry, sweetie. Big client meeting moved to this afternoon. Can't be rescheduled. We'll celebrate this weekend." Mom's text came 20 minutes later. "Have to drive Diana to campus for orientation session. They only offer it today. So sorry, take pictures." Austin didn't even bother with an excuse. "Stuck at work." Congrats, though. I sat in that auditorium watching other families cheer and take pictures, holding signs with their graduates' names, while my row remained completely empty. Other students' families had driven hours to be there. Some families had multiple generations present: parents, grandparents, siblings, cousins, all celebrating this major milestone together. My clinical instructor, Mrs. Rodriguez, noticed me sitting alone and came over during the reception afterward. "Where's your family?" she asked gently. "They're busy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Work stuff, school orientations. You know how it is." She squeezed my hand. "Their loss," she said. "You're going to be an incredible nurse. Some of the best nurses I've ever trained started right where you are. Passionate, dedicated, and ready to make a difference." That night, I came home to find a card on my bed. Inside was a $25 Target gift card and a generic congratulations note. "Congratulations on your graduation. We're proud of you. Sorry we couldn't make it to the ceremony. Love, Mom and Dad." $25 for 2 years of intensive study, clinical rotations, and achieving something that would let me save lives for the next 40 years. Meanwhile, Austin's undergraduate graduation had been a 3-day celebration with dinner reservations at the fanciest restaurant in town, a hotel weekend for out-of-town relatives, and a professional photographer hired to capture every moment. But life has a funny way of working out sometimes. I started working at the Regional Medical Center's ICU right after graduation. The pay was better than I'd expected. $65,000 starting salary with excellent benefits, health insurance that actually covered things, and opportunities for overtime that could significantly increase my earnings. More importantly, I loved the work. Every shift brought new challenges, and I felt like I was making a real difference. The ICU was intense from day one. We handled the sickest patients in the hospital, people recovering from major surgeries, accident victims, patients with life-threatening conditions that required constant monitoring. The nurse-to-patient ratio was strict, never more than 2 patients per nurse, and the level of care was incredibly sophisticated. I quickly learned that ICU nurses weren't just following doctors' orders. We were highly trained professionals who made independent decisions about patient care, adjusted medications based on protocols, recognized early warning signs of complications, and often served as the last line of defense between patients and medical emergencies. Within 3 months, I was recognized for catching a medication error that could have been fatal. A patient was scheduled to receive a blood pressure medication that would have interacted dangerously with another drug he was taking. The computer system hadn't flagged the interaction, but I caught it during my medication review and contacted the physician to get the order changed. Within 6 months, I was recognized as Rookie Nurse of the Year. The award came with a $500 bonus and recognition in the hospital newsletter. More importantly, it meant my supervisors saw potential in me. Within a year, I was training new graduates, teaching them the same skills Mrs. Rodriguez had taught me. By year 2, I was charge nurse on weekend shifts, responsible for coordinating care across the entire ICU, managing staff assignments, and serving as the primary liaison with doctors and administrators. The hospital paid for continuing education, so I started accumulating certifications. Critical care nursing, trauma nursing, wound care specialty, cardiac life support instructor. Each certification came with a pay bump, and I was quickly earning more than I'd ever imagined possible. But the real satisfaction came from the work itself. I was there when Mrs. Chen woke up from a coma after a stroke, squeezing her husband's hand for the first time in 2 weeks. I helped coordinate care for Tommy Rodriguez, a teenager who survived a motorcycle accident that should have killed him. I was part of the team that kept Mr. Williams alive through multiple organ failure until a donor liver became available. These weren't practical moments or sensible career choices. These were life and death situations where my education, training, and instincts made the difference between families going home together or planning funerals. But I didn't tell my family about any of this. What was the point? They'd already decided my career wasn't worth their attention. Instead, our family conversations continued to revolve around Austin and Diana's academic pursuits. Austin had graduated with his political science degree and was working at a consulting firm while applying to MBA programs. Diana was finishing her undergraduate degree in pre-law and studying for the LSAT. Austin's job sounded impressive until you dug into the details. He was essentially a research assistant, putting together PowerPoint presentations and organizing data for senior consultants. The pay was decent, $55,000 per year, but he was working 60-hour weeks and constantly stressed about billable hours. Diana was working part-time at a law office while finishing school, mostly doing filing and basic research. She complained constantly about how boring the work was, but insisted it was building her foundation for a legal career. Both of them were accumulating student debt that would make a mortgage payment look reasonable. Austin owed $180,000 from his undergraduate degree. Diana was looking at similar numbers by the time she finished her bachelor's program. But they were still the golden children, still the family success stories, still the ones whose careers were treated as important and meaningful. Meanwhile, I was literally saving lives and earning more money than either of them, but nobody in my family bothered to ask about my work or my future plans. That's when things got interesting. Austin called me during my 3rd year of nursing, sounding unusually humble. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was just getting home from a particularly exhausting shift where we'd handled 2 trauma cases and a cardiac arrest. "Hey sis, I wanted to run something by you. I got accepted to Wharton's MBA program." "That's great," I said, genuinely happy for him despite everything. "Congratulations." "Yeah, well, there's a slight problem. The tuition is $80,000 per year, and I've already maxed out my federal student loans for my undergraduate degree. I need a cosigner for a private loan." I waited for the punchline. "And? Mom and Dad's credit isn't great after refinancing the house to pay for my undergraduate expenses. I was wondering if you might consider co-signing for me." The audacity was breathtaking. He wanted me to take on financial responsibility for his education after spending years dismissing mine as worthless. "How much are we talking about?" I asked, though I was already dreading the answer. "About $160,000 total for both years. Maybe a little more with living expenses. Wharton's expensive, but it's worth it. MBA graduates from there average $150,000 starting salaries." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Austin, that's more money than I make in 2 years. Come on, it's an investment. Besides, MBA programs have amazing ROI. I'll be able to pay it back easily once I graduate." Then he made his fatal mistake. "Besides," he added casually, "it's not like you have any major expenses. Nurses don't need continuing education or anything like that, right? Your job is pretty much the same forever once you learn it." I was so stunned by the ignorance that I actually laughed. "Excuse me? I mean, once you know how to take temperatures and give shots, that's basically it, right? It's not like business where you have to constantly learn new strategies and market trends." I hung up on him. 20 minutes later, Diana called with a similar request. She'd been accepted to law school at a prestigious university and needed help with financing. "It's only going to be about $50,000 per year," she said, like that was a reasonable amount. "And you know how much lawyers make. It'll pay for itself in like 5 years." When I hesitated, She played the family card. I helped you with math homework in high school, she said. Remember how you used to struggle with algebra? I tutored you for free. Now I'm asking for help, and you're going to say no? The manipulation was so blatant it was almost impressive. She'd helped me with homework exactly twice, and both times she'd been condescending about how simple the problems were. But then she said something that made my decision easy. It's not like nursing school was real college, she said. You basically just learned to follow doctor's orders, right? This is actual higher education we're talking about. Law school is intellectually demanding in a way that nursing programs just aren't. I hung up on her too. The sheer ignorance was breathtaking. If they only knew what nursing actually involved, the pharmacology knowledge that would put pre-med students to shame, the critical thinking skills required to manage multiple complex patients simultaneously, the ability to recognize subtle changes that could indicate life-threatening complications. But they'd never bothered to learn what my job actually entailed. They'd made their assumptions and never questioned them. That weekend, I had dinner with my parents. They'd obviously been coached by Austin and Diana because they tag-teamed me before we even ordered appetizers. We understand Austin and Diana talked to you about helping with school expenses, Mom began diplomatically. They did, I said. And I told them no. Dad leaned forward. Carrie, these are incredible opportunities. Austin could end up as a Fortune 500 CEO. Diana could become a federal judge. This is bigger than individual financial concerns. You're right, I agreed. It is bigger than individual concerns. It's about families supporting each other. They both smiled, thinking they'd won. Which is why I'm curious, I continued, about where my family was when I needed support. The smiles faded. We supported you, Mom said defensively. We encouraged your nursing career. Did you? Because I remember you calling it practical and not like real education. I remember none of you showing up to my graduation. I remember every conversation about my career being immediately redirected to Austin or Diana. That's not what we meant, Dad started. What did you mean exactly? Because Austin literally just told me that nursing doesn't require continuing education and that my job is basically the same forever once I learn it. Diana said nursing school wasn't real college and that I basically just learned to follow orders. And now you want me to risk my financial future to pay for their real education? The silence was deafening. We're family, Mom finally said weakly. Yes, we are. And family should support each other. Like when I graduated and none of you came to my ceremony. Or when I won Rookie Nurse of the Year and you forgot to congratulate me. Or every single time I've tried to share something about my career, and you've changed the subject to talk about Austin's consulting work or Diana's internships. I stood up to leave, but I wasn't done. Here's what's going to happen. Austin and Diana are going to figure out their own financing. They're smart, educated adults who can solve their own problems. And if their education is as valuable as you all claim, they'll find a way to make it work. Carrie, please, Dad started. I'm not finished. I've been listening to you all dismiss my career for years. But here's something you might find interesting. I make $95,000 per year. With overtime and shift differentials, I cleared $110,000 last year. I have excellent health insurance, a pension plan, and more job security than most people in this economy. The looks on their faces were priceless. Dad's jaw literally dropped. Mom blinked rapidly like she was trying to process the numbers. But that's not even the best part, I continued. The best part is that I love my job. I save lives. I comfort families during the worst moments of their lives. I make a difference every single day. And I did it all without a single dollar of help from any of you. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. You want to know the real irony? Austin makes $55,000 per year at his consulting job, working 60 hours a week and hating every minute of it. Diana's making $12 an hour filing papers and dreaming about maybe someday having a career. Meanwhile, your daughter, with the not real education from just community college, is out earning both of them combined. I left them sitting there with their mouths open. For the next few months, I got regular calls from Austin and Diana begging me to reconsider. They'd found co-signers eventually, distant relatives who were impressed by their potential, but the interest rates were brutal. Austin was paying 8.5% on his MBA loans through some private lender that specialized in high-risk educational debt. Diana was stuck with 9.2% for law school. Between the two of them, they were looking at over $400,000 in educational debt with monthly payments that would make a luxury car payment look like pocket change. But that's not where this story ends. Things were about to get much more interesting. 6 months later, I got a call from Mom. She sounded panicked, which was unusual. Mom was typically composed, always ready with diplomatic solutions to family problems. Carrie, we need to talk. It's urgent. It's about Austin and Diana's school loans. Apparently, both of their co-signers had died within months of each other. Great Aunt Ruth with a sudden heart attack, and Uncle Frank with cancer that progressed faster than expected. The loans had clauses requiring immediate payment in full if the co-signer died or became financially unable to continue payments. Austin was halfway through his MBA program, already $80,000 in debt with another year to go. Diana had just finished her first year of law school with $50,000 in debt and 2 more years ahead of her. Neither could afford to continue without immediate financial help, and neither could pay off the existing loans. They'll have to drop out, Mom said, crying actual tears. All that money wasted, all those dreams down the drain. Austin is so close to graduating. Diana was doing so well. That's terrible, I said, not feeling terrible at all. I felt bad about their co-signers dying, of course, but the loan situation was entirely predictable. We were hoping maybe you could help, just temporarily, until they graduate and get jobs. The sheer audacity still amazes me. They wanted me to take on hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt for the same people who'd spent years dismissing my career as unimportant. Mom, do you remember what you said when I asked for help with textbooks during nursing school? Silence. You said I needed to learn to handle my own expenses. That financial independence was part of growing up. This is different. No, it's not. It's exactly the same. Austin and Diana are adults who made financial decisions. Now they get to live with the consequences. I hung up. Within a week, both Austin and Diana had dropped out of their programs. Austin was 3 semesters away from his MBA, tantalizingly close to the degree he'd been working toward for years. Diana had to leave law school with nothing to show for her year except massive debt and no degree to justify it. The family blamed me, of course. I was selfish, vindictive, jealous of their success. Dad called me disgraceful and said I was destroying the family's future. Mom sent long text messages about how disappointed she was in my lack of family loyalty. Austin left several voicemails accusing me of sabotaging his career out of jealousy. You can't stand that I was going to be more successful than you, he said in one particularly bitter message. So you decided to drag me down to your level. Diana was more direct. I hope you're happy. You've ruined everything for both of us because you're too selfish to help your own family. But here's the thing about consequences. They're educational. Austin ended up taking a job at a mid-level consulting firm making $75,000 per year. After taxes and his student loan payments from both undergraduate and his partial MBA, he was taking home less than I was. The work was mindless, mostly data entry and basic analysis that any recent graduate could handle. Diana found work as a paralegal, making $45,000 annually, while still owing $50,000 in law school debt. She spent her days doing document review and filing, exactly the kind of boring legal work she'd complained about during her undergraduate internship. Meanwhile, I'd been promoted to nurse manager and was pursuing my master's in nursing administration through a program my hospital paid for completely. My salary had jumped to $120,000, and I was being courted by other hospitals offering even more money. The irony was perfect. They'd dropped out of expensive programs to get the same kinds of jobs they could have gotten straight out of undergraduate school, while accumulating debt that would follow them for decades. I, on the other hand, was advancing in my career, earning more money than either of them, and working in a field where I made a genuine difference in people's lives. The real kicker came last Christmas, when we all gathered at my parents' house for what would turn out to be our final family holiday together. It was awkward, as you might imagine. Nobody talked about careers or education. The subjects that had dominated every family dinner for years were suddenly off limits. But Diana couldn't help herself. After a few glasses of wine, she started lamenting her lost potential. I could have been a successful attorney, she slurred, making 6 figures, having prestige, making a real difference in the world. You mean like I do? I asked quietly. The room went silent. I make 6 figures, I continued. I have prestige in my field. I've been invited to speak at 3 national conferences this year. I save lives and comfort families and train the next generation of nurses. But you've never considered that real success, have you? Diana started crying. Austin stared at his plate. My parents looked like they wanted to disappear. You want to know the real difference between us? I asked, standing up. I followed my passion and found success. You chased prestige and found debt. I built a career based on helping others, and it's given me everything I wanted. You tried to buy success with borrowed money, and it cost you everything. I grabbed my coat and headed for the door. Maybe next year you'll appreciate that your practical daughter with the not real education is the only one in this family who actually has her life together. That was 6 months ago. We haven't spoken since. Austin is still at the consulting firm, slowly paying down debt while watching younger MBA graduates get promoted past him. The partial MBA on his resume actually works against him. Employers wonder why he didn't finish, and he can't exactly explain that his family wouldn't co-sign his loans. Diana is studying for the LSAT again, hoping to reapply to law school, but she can't get financing with her existing debt load. She'd need someone to co-sign, and after what happened with their previous co-signers, no one in the extended family is willing to take that risk. My parents lost their retirement savings helping with the original loan payments and are now working longer than they'd planned. Dad mentioned getting a part-time job at Home Depot to make ends meet. Mom has been looking into returning to work full-time for the first time in 15 years. The house they refinanced to pay for Austin's undergraduate education is underwater now. They owe more than it's worth, and with their credit damaged from the loan defaults, they can't refinance for better rates. And me? I just accepted a position as director of nursing at a prestigious hospital across the state. The salary is $150,000 plus performance bonuses, with a full relocation package and tuition reimbursement for my upcoming doctorate program. They're paying for me to pursue a doctor of nursing practice, which will qualify me for executive leadership positions and potentially teaching roles at major universities. The same universities that my family always thought were out of my reach. I'm moving next month to start my new life, surrounded by colleagues who respect nursing as a profession and see continuing education as an investment worth making. My new hospital has a magnet designation, which means they're recognized nationally for nursing excellence and innovation. Update. For those asking, no, I haven't heard from my family since Christmas. Austin sent one text asking if I knew of any nursing positions that might hire someone with business experience to help with administration. I replied with the contact information for a few nursing schools and suggested he consider getting actual healthcare credentials first. Diana reached out once through a mutual friend, asking if I might consider mentoring her if she decided to pursue healthcare administration. I declined. They had their chance to show interest in my career when it might have mattered. Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding. Some families aren't worth the effort. And sometimes the best thing you can do is prove them wrong by living well. The community college graduate with the not real education is doing just fine without their approval. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way.